Welcome back to WagerTalk.com, and I hope this is the first of many videos we get to do with this guy when he gets to tell stories. And you've made it kind of famous, your story times with a good friend of ours that we both do podcasts with, Gil Alexander, Beating the Book podcast. And he doesn't have exclusive rights. I had to make sure, and I asked you, and you said as long as I doubled what Gil was paying you, you'd come on and tell a story time with us. So, Gil, sorry, I had to give him double what you're paying him, and he agreed.
Yeah.
Chris Andrews.
We won't mention any figures.
Thanks for coming aboard, and you do that podcast with Gil, Guessing the Line show, very popular podcast with Gil, and you guys have a segment every week, and I think it's actually become bigger than the actual Guessing the Lines part of the show. You guys would come out and do it on Mondays for the NFL season. You guys would talk about the opening numbers and such, but you always would share a story, and you've been in Vegas. When did you first come to Vegas?
I came to Las Vegas in 1979. Spent a couple years here, went to Reno, was back in Vegas, always traveled back and forth. And it's funny, Mark, I've always had more friends in Las Vegas than I've had in Reno. So my kids always would tease me, Dad, you're a Vegas guy. You're not a Reno guy.
79, I'm going to date you, buddy. I was graduating high school. Sorry about that. But do you remember our first encounter? It was at, you were doing a radio show in Reno, and place that I was working at before. It set up me doing a spot on your show one Friday, and I didn't know you were from, we had never met before, and I didn't know you were from Pittsburgh. And this joke here will only be laughed on from people in Pittsburgh, but they'll know it. When I called into the station, you guys sent the number for me to call at what time and everything. A guy answers the studio phone and answers, Minio's Pizza, and I'm like, and anybody that's been in Pittsburgh, that's a famous pizza joint in Pittsburgh, and that's how you let me know you were a fellow Pittsburgher, and we hit it off ever since.
All right, that's exactly right. We've been friends ever since. I remember you kind of stammered, like, do I have that programmed into my phone or what? You probably do.
Well, you just assumed by my stature, my physique, that I've eaten a few pies there. And being the wise guy that you are, you were correct with that one.
Yeah. You and I have broken bread together a couple of times as well. And we don't eat off the healthy diet menu.
No, not at all. But I know one thing. As soon as the minute you came back to Vegas, restaurant stocks all went up.
I can see why.
But you had a fun time with Gil telling stories, and people love old Vegas stories. Share one with us, and I hope it's one of many that we get you to come back and do with us and share with our listeners.
Well, thank you. I might as well plug what I'm doing. That Storytime got so popular, people encouraged me to write a book about it. So I have a book. I wrote it. I sent it to an editor. She gave me some things to do. I'm about halfway through the re-edit, and so I'm hoping to have it out by Christmas. So
well, I'm hoping to get a signed autographed copy.
I'm sure you will, and as soon as you share one of those meatballs with me that you wrote about not that long ago. Anyway, the one story that really a lot of people loved, and I'm fortunate to be here to tell it. When I first moved to Reno, and I was running the Calneva Race and Sportsbook, I had this one customer. He was a very good customer, loved to bet the horses, betting every day. And we started out, just, hi, how are you? And, we got to be a little better friends, had a drink or two now and then. And for some reason, he started opening up to me as to who and what he was. Well, he claimed to be Meyer Lansky's hitman and said he had killed a bunch of people over the course of time. And I'm thinking, well, why are you telling me this? But I got to know him, and he was kind of a guy you weren't sure if you could believe that or not. But it was like kind of questionable. And I happened to know a guy who had done some things with Lansky over the years, but strictly on the bookmaking end, nothing more than that. So I called him up, and I described this guy, and I'll say his name because I put it out last time. His name's Max Kirshner, K-U. Anyway, I asked him, I said, do you know this guy? And I kind of described him. He says, I don't recognize the name. He sounds like a guy Meyer would use. And I remember hanging up with him. His last words to me were, be careful. Okay, so now our relationship kind of went on. and he asked me for $800. He said, I was stuck. The horses have been bad, and so so this is 1982. $800 was a lot of money. I was a young guy. I was unmarried, but I figured, okay, I'm going to give the guy the 800. So I give him the 800. He disappears 2 days later. So I kind of just said, well, I blew $800. So a couple months go by, and I had a couple days off. I wanted to go to the racetrack in Bay Meadows, which was the closest to us. Me being from Reno, Bay Meadows was on the peninsula near San Francisco. So I go down to the racetrack, and I'm with my girlfriend, who eventually became my wife. But I'm with my girlfriend, and we're up in the clubhouse, and I come walking around the corner, and who do I see? Max. Now, a little backstory here. Max was like a little tough guy, but really a tough guy. But Max was the kind of guy, he was perpetually on some fad diet or another, and he would gain and lose 30 pounds, like honestly, faster than anybody I've ever seen in my life. I mean, you'd see him 1 week to the next, and you never knew. So I come around the corner, there's Max. Now, I have to tell you, not like I'm that worldly, and certainly not at that age, but I knew a couple things. First of all, if you ever knew these mob guys, you really didn't want to let them take advantage of you, because they really would take advantage of you if they thought they could. But the second thing is, you had to be pretty careful on how you did that. You couldn't offend these guys, because it could be dangerous very easily. So I come around with my girlfriend, there's Max. Hey, Max, how are you? And I look at my girlfriend, I says, go take a walk. Because first of all, I don't know how this is going to turn out. Believe me when I tell you, I was more than a little scared. And but I said, hey, Max, what's going on? We talked. It's Max. So we chit-chatted for a second. Max, am I ever going to get my $800 back? Yeah, I was going to come up, but I couldn't. I said, well, why couldn't you? He said, well, I've been in the hospital. I said, you've been in the hospital? He says, yeah, I got shot. And I looked at him, I said, well, congratulations. And he says, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you're the first guy to go into the hospital for a month and gain 30 pounds. And he started laughing. And right then I says, okay, I'm pretty sure he's not going to kill me, at least not right here. So he started laughing, and we chatted a little bit, and he says, yeah, I know I got to make it good to you, and you've always been good to me. I'll come up to Reno again one day, and I'll get you your money. I said, okay, and I kind of left it and shook his hand. And in all honesty, the $800 was not that important to me. So anyway, so a couple months go by, and I used to get, in the old days, reading the newspapers, and I always get the San Francisco paper, being in Reno. And I get the paper, and I look on the front page of the second section, which was the local section. Guy dies being gunned down in San Mateo in a motel parking lot. I read Max Kirshner. It was him. Right next to him was a picture of Meyer Lansky, who had happened to get indicted that day for something completely unrelated. And I remember thinking, I'm looking at this thinking, somebody in the copy room knows something. There was no mention of one another, but they put the articles right next to each other. And as I'm telling the story, and I had totally forgotten this, I was telling the story on Gil's podcast. Gil typed in Max Kirshner. Well, he said he'd claimed to kill 53 people.
Wow.
And I'm glad it wasn't 54. But he also wrote a book about, under an assumed name, I want to say it was Joey Black. And if you go on Amazon, you could find these. He wrote a couple of books about the life of a hitman. And even on his tax return, the one year he was such a character, he put down salesman/hitman as his occupation. So he was a real character. But the one thing that people always laughed at, if he would have, because we were in a crowded room, I felt okay. I wasn't 100% sure. But I always said, if somehow he would have killed me right there in cold blood, my spirit wouldn't be floating around saying, geez, I never saw that coming. because I definitely was very aware that it might be coming. I was, like I said, when I told it on Gil's side, my heart was beating as I told it.
I can imagine.
I was still afraid. This is 35 years later, but it was a little bit scary, but I got through that.
Congratulations for getting through that one and not being number 54.
I'm not number 54 on his belt, so that's a lucky number.
Well, we're glad, and I hope to get you back and tell us some more of those stories, and hope Gil's not too mad at us for hijacking.
He'll be okay.
Well, you know, he lost RG3 this week in Washington.
Oh,
too,
I know. He's in mourning heavily. Yeah.
So it's been a rough week for him. All right, he's Chris Andrews. Follow him on Twitter at Andrews Sports. Sorry we went a little long on this video, but hey, when you get stories this good, we got to get them out there, and we hope to do a bunch more of these with Chris now that he's back in Vegas, when we can pry him away from his new job and see if we can get him in here. It's going to cost me a lunch or a dinner, but they're worth it to get him in here and tell those stories. Thanks again, Chris, and good luck with the new gig at South Point. I'm sure we'll be seeing you in definitely Kentucky Derby in the horse room.
Well, Marco, thank you.
All right. Stay tuned for more videos here at WagerTalk.com.